capitalist system as it goes cannot continue if we're also going to save our planet and ourselves as human beings.
Thank you. Yes.
Right? Because we continue to exploit nature, which we are part of, as a superior species, and we are wiping out other species. We are wiping out ourselves. Like the number of people who are leaving their homes because of not only political unrest, but also environmental destruction, right? I don't know how many millions of refugees there are. Our water levels are increasing. The ice on on our polar caps is melting. Our air is not getting any cleaner. The water that we have is the water we have. There is no more.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back today with another episode. We've got Dr. Fiona Green. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you, Chris.
She is at the University of Winnipeg, a professor, PhD, all-around smart person, wonderful human being. We're going to talk a little bit today about gender, maybe a little race. We're going to talk about feminism, stuff like this. But you're from Winnipeg. What's it like there? Is it cold?
I am from Winnipeg. I'm not located there at this moment, but winters there are pretty harsh and it's pretty cold, snowy. I'm a visitor and uninvited guest on the Wasanich People's Territory, which is on Vancouver Island. And I've been here for 3 years through the COVID experience, teaching remotely with the University of Winnipeg in Women's and Gender Studies.
Wow. So no coconuts up there, but still nice.
Oh, beautiful here. Beautiful beaches, forests, mountains, ocean. It's a good place to be. It's February and the buds are coming out. And in Canada, most of Canada is covered with snow at the moment. So it is our little paradise in Canada for sure.
And so what did you call the name of the Indigenous people that were from that region? What are they called?
Wasanich.
Okay.
And there are numerous First Nations within this territory, and that's sort of the name for a collection of about 4 different nations who live in this particular area. All of Canada and the United States, right? The original inhabitants, the peoples of those lands, of those territories, have been displaced off their lands mostly. And I won't go into it, but Canada has a dreadful history, colonial history of genocide. And Canada is going through a truth and reconciliation process right now. And one of the very small steps to many that need to take place is learning and giving acknowledgement of the territories that we're on as uninvited guests on the stolen lands. Really, there are some signed treaties, and so the University of Winnipeg, for example, is in Treaty 1. It's also, though, the territories of the Anishinaabe, the Dene, the Cree people. Like there are a number of people territories. It's also the heart of the Métis Nation. So there's complexity in the ownership of the land, and from what I understand of First Nations Indigenous relationships and relations with the land, is that they are stewards of the land. They're part of nature, so there's an understanding that we are all relations. All humans are relatives, but so are rocks and water and trees and nature. We are part of the universe. We are not separate from nature. We're animals. And so, yeah, speaking about where I'm located is a small step in that. And I think, a larger conversation and policy and action needs to take place. And part of that is there's a land back movement, which is multi-layered, and it means actually giving land back. But it also can mean, for example, all of our legislatures, all of our government bodies are all of where we're living is on stolen land. So a land back move may be that our parliaments and our legislatures, where government sits, pays rent to the peoples whose land they're on. So, that's one small example.
Also, some kind of infrastructure where you can come in and help them get a basic amount of water security, food security. But you think that it's best that we maybe take a tip from them on how to live. Maybe we wouldn't have this climate change issue if we would have just been one with the land. Absolutely.
Well, Indigenous ways of knowing and knowledge is often land-based, right? It's based on what I've just said, this connection, and also looking forward 7 generations. So decisions which are made today consider what may happen 7 generations from now. And to get back to your point, yes, I think it's absolutely disgraceful that there are Indigenous people living on reserve without running water, without electricity, are having boil water advisories for years and years and years. And it's shameful. And I just saw a meme online, there's a big tussle right now about shipping oil through pipelines, right, across Canada. And it's going through some Indigenous territories. And there's a lot of complex negotiations and feelings around that. But this meme was saying, we're eager to and seem to be able to figure out how to transport gasoline and fuel through pipes. Why can we not do that with water to First Nations and Indigenous
great question
territory, right? And why should it have to be tapped or put through those kinds of systems? Why isn't there anyway? So yeah, there's a great deal that needs to be done. And maybe linking this to my own teaching in women's and gender studies, it's an intersectional approach that I and my colleagues take at the University of Winnipeg. So we cannot speak about gender or feminism or sex or sexuality or race without bringing all of those pieces together. So when we're talking about people, which people are we talking about? What are their life experiences? Where are they located? What is the colonial history? Because Canada and the US, right? And most of the world, there's a colonial history there. And so how are we now? And we're still, it's not over. We're still within those structures and policies which are set on colonial attitudes, beliefs. How do we move from that into a way of respecting diversity of people, of knowledges, of ways of being for everyone? It's a huge order. And that's partly what feminism is about. It's definitely about, understanding gender dynamics and intersecting forms of domination and oppression and systems which are in place. It's not about individuals. It is about individuals, but you cannot have any kind of social change unless you understand those larger structures. So we talk intersectionality, which is, a theory and an approach and a lens, and a praxis even, was developed by Kimberly Crenshaw, an African-American theorist, lawyer, feminist, in the early 90s, maybe 1989, 1991, Forgive me for not knowing the exact date. And that contribution has been huge within lots of fields, but particularly within feminism. And I think it's been watered down or, moved into the mainstream. And so people think it's a neoliberal approach to look at the intersections of my identity as an individual. When in fact that's important. But what is more important or as significant is recognizing that my identity is connected to social systems, which give me privilege because of my white skin color, because I'm a heterosexual identifying person. I'm a temporarily able-bodied person. I'm a middle-class person. I'm a formally educated person. That comes with huge privilege that I don't ask for. There are systems in place that give that to me. If I'm pulled over by a police officer, I am not scared for my life in the way that a person of color would be. Particularly in Canada, if I were an Indigenous person, or a Black person, or, that would be, so that's something I don't really have to, I don't like getting pulled over by the police, but I don't have that kind of terror embodied because I've been pulled over, because I know that I have some privilege. I am articulate. I think, I have white skin. I'm middle class. I have all kinds of privilege. So an intersectional lens looks at the ways in which individuals benefit or are disadvantaged or oppressed in relation to the social systems which are in place. So when we talk about, just touching back on talking about land acknowledgements and recognizing our colonial history, it's steeped within all of our systems as well, right? So it's huge.
Yeah.
The feminist project is massive. It's absolutely massive.
Yeah. Is there a kind of does capitalism reinforce some of these divisions, or are beyond neoliberal politics you're talking about in any kind of economic system? This idea.
Oh, well, I think capitalism benefits absolutely from separating people into groups and categories and
social hierarchies.
We have a criminal justice system and a system of I'm grappling for words, but we have a prison industrial complex, right? And it's full of people who are disadvantaged and marginalized, who economically, racially have been disadvantaged or have been marginalized and have been struggling to live within a capitalist, patriarchal, white supremacist society, right? Capitalism is right in there. I mean, the late Bell Hooks talks about that, right? That we live in a capitalist, patriarchal, white supremacist, patriarchal society, and all that's the interlocking systems of oppression that I was talking about. Like that's, capitalism is right in there, and capitalism is very nimble, capable of shifting and of adapting and adopting, language and of those who are organizing, in movements to resist the status quo, the way that the world is working. So, movements, feminism has, women's liberation from the 60s and 70s, right? Choice was about reproduction, was about autonomy, was about having complete control over one's body, pregnant or not, for, people who can get pregnant. And so now, you see advertising has moved to, using the language of choice. It's your choice. It's your choice. Well, that's not really that wasn't the basis of where, autonomy and choice was coming from for feminists. So the quick adaptation and adoption and appropriation of language or symbols is easily used by, by capitalists, by people who are marketing.
If the demographic is big enough, we'll put rainbow flags on our Burger King wrapper and just so we can draw in those. But yeah, sure. The money is the one thing that transcends all religions and other. But in another way, like the politics within capitalism and the social hierarchies would really reinforce these divisions, though, because it works for them for some reason to have these things, these divisions, the white rich people, white men on top, and then everybody else kind of parsed out underneath. What's the benefit? Why do these guys want a monoculture, monocropped world? And why are they so against diversity? And don't you think diversity is, useful or, progressive?
Oh, absolutely it is. But I think, if you're always, and it doesn't mean, and I think you pointed to, putting rainbow wrappers on burgers. And, here we have generally in the summer, June or July, depending on the province or the city, we have massive gay pride events, right? People in the street, there are parades and hundreds, thousands of people, depending on the location, will turn up, and it's a big celebration. And there's corporate sponsorship also. The Royal Bank of Canada and other financial institutions will be present, and will, for that month, will have rainbow flags on their windows and all of that. But their policies don't change. Is it a safe place for queer and trans folks to work, to be a customer? What are their policies like? What are their hiring policies like? Do they have an equity and diversity and inclusion policy which is real, so that there isn't a token person to represent that particular marginalized group, whether that's due to skin color or ethnicity or religion or gender identity or sexual orientation, ability, disability, whatever. But is it truly a place that honors diversity? And I would suggest that there are very, very few organizations, whether, they're to make profit, or schools or universities or, banks or media conglomerates or, you name it. You name it, right?
It bothers me that, these corporations are so shadowy and so big that they do actually have large parts of them that are all finance, where they have people investing money, taking money, part of the money from their profits and going and reinvesting into stuff. So it's really hard to see and hard to know that, Bank of America would be turning around and giving money to BlackRock, who is in turn turning around and giving money to Fox News or something like this, somebody who's extremely transphobic and, hate mongering. So, and they are more partners than they are friends to you. And so it's, you can't really turn your back without being involved in something shady in a capitalistic thing, I guess is what I'm saying. But
yes, and I think, those who are in positions of power and privilege want to maintain it. And so you mentioned earlier, right? It's the white, able-bodied, heterosexual male who, generally that's the person, not always, but, of the 1%, who has the wealth on the globe, those are generally the people, and they're generally men if they're not, necessarily white skinned, and might be in other countries and still, within that. But it's to their advantage to keep their place by keeping other people disadvantaged and lower than them economically. There's a theory called the muted group theory, which I use in my teaching, and it looks at who is in positions of power and authority, and within the media, right? We know, and I'm blown away by over the last 5 years, I guess, since Trump era, right? Really being in the presidential office, right? We now have people fact checking true, like what people say all the time, and people aren't sure what is true and what is not true, and what does truth even mean? Like, is it the perception of some people and not others? And so when you think about who's in a position of dominance, who owns the airwaves? I mean, that's sort of old school talking, but even on the online, like Elon Musk, what's he doing? Why? I mean, he's not doing so well, but he is in a position to shape, right? Who's on Twitter, right? Like, what does that then become? And what about Instagram and Facebook? And it's interesting, right? Like, there's been a shift in even the name of Facebook because they were in hot water, in the US. Like, there's lots of stuff so who is in a position and has the authority and the ability to, and we see it in propaganda all the time. We see this with Putin in the devastating war in Ukraine right now. What is told and who do we believe, and how many people say what they say? Do we actually believe that it's true, or is this a spin? And I know politicians have always spun, their perspective. But, you have people questioning whether, people did really walk on the moon and what, and to some degree, and I believe people walked on the moon. Don't get, however, you can understand in this day and age where we have studios, we have video ability, we can like this chat GPT.
Oh yeah,
right?
You've seen this. Yeah.
And like as a scholar and as an academic, this is a huge concern. Are students learning? Are they simply going to these free AI products, right? Capitalism again, right? Although there's some for free, right? But then generating and not learning the critical skills of thinking and asking questions and understanding themselves in relation to the world. I mean, that's a huge piece. If we're going to change systems, individuals are in those systems. So who are in those places of power and authority, and who are the ones who are, maintaining that because of their location within those hierarchical systems, right? So that's of concern. And I just saw a fabricated, completely generated newscast by artificial AI. So the human created and speaking and dialogue was all artificially created by was created by artificial intelligence. Ooh. Right? So I'm real. Are you real?
I might be. I might not be. You'll never know. What I mean? Like, know.
So we're moving into an era, I think, of really the general populace who is aware, maybe second guessing what they think they know. And that is a very troubling place to be, unless you're in a position of power and you're dictating what Well, people are starting to believe.
Did this happen before in history when the birth of religions happened, you had at the same time, you had just this massive kind of renaissance full of Islamic, and then you got Christianity and Judaism all kind of around about the same time, and superstition filling the void in these people's lives, and this need to believe in something higher, like corresponding with, I don't know what's going on at the time, the agricultural revolution, where this tractor or like stuff was being invented, new things, people were settling down after millions of years of being nomadic. Maybe they just needed, like, what's the quote they say? If God didn't exist, we would feel the need to invent him.
Well, maybe God has been invented, but that's another topic altogether.
But what's to account for this this kind of superstitious like what's going on now is completely the rebirth of conspiracy theories and superstition and propaganda.
Well, and I think those things have always been present. I think they're becoming more prevalent. And I think their prevalence is supported by online, the internet and having access to all kinds of information. The algorithms don't help because they bubble people, right? So I was at something last night, a great performances by many folks. And one person was doing a bit of a stand-up kind of presentation and was talking about algorithms and how she's in maybe 30, maybe she's in early 30s, late 20s. And she decided to see what would happen. And she put her age on one of her social media platforms as 80. And she said she's now getting Metamucil ads, insurance ads, right? Because that's what happens. Like what you're searching for then feeds into the algorithm and then it spits back to you what it thinks you're going to buy, right? So she said she's got this little experiment going, right? Vacations, retirement schemes, reselling your home, equity in your home. She doesn't even have a home. I mean, she has a home, but she's not a homeowner. She doesn't have a mortgage, whatever, right? So I'm sort of drifted off your question, but all this to say that there is so much more information available. And I think we are also targeted to reinforce maybe our belief systems and our fears, our doubts. And so people, I think, have always been complex and divided into groups. I mean, you used the religious example, but, we could talk about religion. We can talk about just ideologies in general, Marxists versus capitalists. It's like, right. So, or socialists or whoever, right? Feminists against misogynists, right? So you've got that information out there and it's just being fed back. And so we are right now, we were talking before coming live, right? Or taping that we've just come through and are in, I believe, we're in a huge historically significant transitional period. With COVID, with the climate crisis, with this war that's going on in Ukraine. I mean, there are wars going on all over the world all the time, but this is, and maybe it's because it's more of a Western war than not, right? So we're global economy almost, I can't say almost collapsed during COVID, but there are some very significant changes that happened globally. Our economic system, the capitalist system as it goes, cannot continue if we're also going to save our planet and ourselves as human beings.
Thank you. Yes.
Right? Because we continue to exploit nature, which we are part of, as a superior species, and we are wiping out other species, we are wiping out ourselves. Like the number of people who are leaving their homes because of not only political unrest, but also environmental destruction, right? I don't know how many millions of refugees there are. Our water levels are increasing. The ice on on their polar caps is melting. Our air is not getting any cleaner. The water that we have is the water we have. There is no more. Right? Yes, we can plant more trees, like we can do some things, but our water supply, and again, this was pointed out by a friend of mine who said, when you think about the universe, everything that we have was created at a time, and this water keeps recycling through because we're in this little bubble, the globe, right? And it keeps, so we keep using and abusing water. And, in Canada, we're very lucky. We still have quite a bit of fresh water, but there are many, although let me say clearly, a lot of Indigenous people do not on their territories, right? So I'm not forgetting that. Generally, though, this part of the world, this part of the planet right now, North America is doing okay, although the Colorado River is drying up, right? Like we've got massive things going on. So I think we're in a time of great distress for most people who are aware. And we're not sure what to believe. We don't know what's going to happen. I think the sort of the arrogance and confidence that humans may have had prior to COVID has been really shaken. And this is my trajectory of my life. I'm planning it. This is what's going to happen. It's not going to happen. Yes, I always could have been hit by a bus tomorrow, or as I step outside, I've always known that. But for me personally, going through COVID has been, yes, I can kind of plan what I think is going to happen in a few months, but who knows? So I think that uncertainty, is different now.
Do you see the difference? Because you work with young people essentially. What do they say? Do you get that reflection from them? Are they worried? Are they living a different life than you lived in that way?
Absolutely. Students that I have the privilege to share time with and learn alongside. I learn so much with them and from them. They are anxious, more anxious. Like I've been teaching for 30 years, and yes, this is a different format being online. And for some, it's a godsend because they have high anxiety around people. And so being in a comfortable space and being able to turn off their camera and just listen and watch, it may be frustrating for me on my end because I don't know who I'm speaking with, but for them it's comforting. They can have, their food, their pets, their whatever they like,
in their jammies,
whatever they want.
Right,
whatever makes them comfortable. However, I would say that the anxiety around climate change, the crisis, it's a climate crisis that we're in, around COVID, around being completely isolated or being isolated with family. Families aren't necessarily the best places for us. I mean, we come and we go outside of COVID. Most people leave their habitat, go out, right, come back to their dwelling, but you're not 24/7. And I have a friend who's a lawyer, and she said, "Oh yeah, the divorce lawyers made a mint over COVID because people were now having to spend 24/7 with each other. And maybe in the past they could, they had their own activities, they were working outside of the home, like they had their lives and they came together for a few hours. So for students, students who are generally in their late teens, early 20s, there's a lot going on in their lives around their self-discovery, who they are, what they think, who they are as individuals. And they may be in families where those values are different, are questioned, where there's not the freedom to have those kinds of exploration experiences. And when you're at home behind a screen, how do you have those experiences, right? So I think that there was a big pause put on those kinds of possible experiences for students, and anxiety has crept in. And so coming out now of those kinds of more intense living situations with people you may or may not enjoy being with, into the public and needing to reestablish relationships. I was speaking again at this event last night. There was someone there who just moved to Victoria, where this event was happening 2.5 years ago. That's the time of COVID. They're a young person, and they are just now coming out, trying to find a community, because they haven't really been, in-person events are just starting, where people are showing up with relative ease. I think in the past, people would go with everyone's masked and everyone's like, don't breathe on me. Like there are too many people in this space, right? And there's still some of that, right? It was space where there was a fair amount of space between people, and I noticed people were not all glommed together, right? People were still needing their 3 to 6 feet of space around them to feel comfortable. A couple of people were wearing masks, most weren't. It was a small venue, small number of people. But this person was talking about what I imagine my students are talking about, and feeling. It's a scary time. Scary time.
A lot of anxiety.
And, yeah, not only that, but I don't know, maybe where you are, but businesses have closed down. Everyone's looking for people to work. However, the working conditions may or may not be great. People are reluctant to take on those lower paying jobs. There's just a lot of uncertainty. Whereas I think for myself, when I was that age, or even, people in the in-between generations, you go, you'd get a job, you might do some volunteering, and you would imagine that you were going to have the stepping stone to a career, something, you'd be some kind of professional, or you would have a substantial salary doing something that you liked. And I think, of course, there's always uncertainty about what that might be. And that's, I think, part of being that age. And I think part of the beauty of those who do have the privilege and are able to go to university, they can explore what they want to do, what they're thinking, what that looks like for them. But I don't see that kind of confidence in, not necessarily and in themselves, but in the future.
Yeah.
They're not sure that the future is actually going to provide them, like the dream, right, that sort of progressive dream that most middle class people have had of, the stepping stones. Half of those stones aren't there anymore to step on, right? Like,
do you have the issue with the commodification of housing, and these young kids also feeling like they're never going to be able to own their own home?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Rent is going up phenomenally. People are living in situations with possibly more people than they want to afford to live independently from their parents or their families. Some people are staying with their families longer because they cannot A, find a place, B, they cannot find a place that they can afford, or they're trying to save up to own their own place. And, again, this is a very privileged middle class kind of situation. Some kids are staying much longer in their parents' homes to save money, to put down a down payment. Like mortgage rates are still going up here. I don't know, in Germany if that's happening. Like we're still trying to figure out the inflation rate. And again, this going back to what's happened through COVID in terms of the global economic structures, things have shifted, right? Things are unstable. So what has worked, and I'm not an economist, but what has worked, for the past decade, that's not working anymore in so many realms.
Yeah.
So I think people are fearful, are unsure, are anxious, are angry as hell at the situation we're in, that their ancestors and, generations that have come before them have not been good stewards of this planet.
Yeah. We have a lot to learn. And when I do see the vitriol of young people, it gives me hope. It's just the clock is ticking and we need to figure out some massive, quick solutions. If people lived a little bit closer to kind of how I do, I grow my own mushrooms. I just little things. I don't go on long vacations. There are so many things I can abstain from that can keep us ahead of the curve. But most people really like their fast food, and they like driving around with no particular place to go, and just, that's they still want that dream. So do you think that for humans, at least Western humans, the kind of life that you're promised, or the life, what do they call it, life quality that you could expect, has peaked?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think, I'm a boomer, right? I'm
You
62.
lucky dog, you.
I'm 62, and I'm very well aware of my privilege, as I had said earlier. I think we're on. I did live through the 80s, and there was a bit of a wobble in terms of the economy, but we came out of it. But I don't know what the next sort of invention is going to be, getting back to your question around capitalism, right? That's going to pull us out of this without destroying the planet.
I think they're going to dream up some combination of robots and reverting back to kind of caveman style living, and some marriage of both. And, worst case scenario, some kind of Mad Max situation where we fight to the death over a glass of water. Who knows?
Oh gosh,
I'm not an optimist per se. That I have my scotch, so that helps me. Well, we just totally crushed 40 minutes nonstop. You're so wonderful to talk with. I would love to have you back and talk about literally anything. All my prepared questions out the window.
Well, thank you. It's been wonderful. I've enjoyed this, and I would love to carry on a conversation at another time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One of my favorite guests. Okay, we got Dr. Fiona Green, University of Winnipeg, wonderful human being, PhD. It's one smart cookie. Really, really great to talk with you. We'll wave goodbye to everybody, and then we'll talk after. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.